Hey guys, it's Godbars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 69th episode of my series where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it had, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. Well, I've already covered LP on here through his first solo album and his work on the Cold Vein. Today I get to talk about Run the Jewels, a collaboration between LP and somebody I haven't really featured on the channel much, Killer Mike. I'm not going to delve too much into LP's background since I already did so on the previous videos, but it was very different from Mike, who rose to prominence in the South through his work with Outkast and the rest of the Dungeon family. At the same time, L was helping develop the independent rap scene over in the East Coast through the work he was doing with Company Flow and Raucous Records. So while they were already legends in their own right, it's impossible to argue that they reached a newfound peak of their respective careers this last decade with RTJ. If you know anything about this series of albums, you'll know there hasn't been one remotely bad one so far. I've never heard of someone who loves one of the Run the Jewels albums despising another one. For me, that's no exception, but as much as I love them all, the second one holds a special place in my heart as the very first one I heard. This was the year RTJ2 came out, and I was still in high school. I'd heard about the album online and thought the cover was unsettling and kind of foreboding, and I have a very specific memory of being in an airport listening to this entire LP front to back for the first time. I don't even remember which airport or where I was going. I just remember the experience being so different from anything I'd been exposed to. I knew a small handful of the albums coming out each year at that age, so the only comparison in my head were alternative acts like Death Grips or Clipping. But Run the Jewels felt a little more accessible as something to just throw on in the car with friends. But of course, just like either of those more industrial hip hop acts, it's much more than just that. Though the loud bass rattling mixing here does have to be applauded, as I've heard LP say he produced these songs specifically so whatever drill or trap song would come on the radio would be blown out of the water when these tracks followed it. And I think he definitely succeeded because it's hard to think of a lot of material after, even before this point in the 2010s, that slaps as hard as Oh My Darling Don't Cry. But this collaboration didn't stem from lifelong friendship. These guys only met in 2011, and their musical partnership technically started in 2012, with LP fully producing Killer Mike's standout solo album Rap Music. Then in return, Mike did a guest appearance on LP's Cancer for Cure that same year. Me and most other people at the time assumed this was just your typical, oh, that was a fun matchup, it was cool to hear them work together, and both legends would go about their separate ways. However, just the next year in 2013, we would be proven wrong with the first Run the Jewels album. Even with that groundbreaking head turner that reinvented how people saw the duo, there were still skeptics who thought the second album wouldn't be as good as the first, either through the idea that the debut's success was a fluke or that they were just going to make the same album again. But as usual, they got the last laugh by putting out an album not just better than the first one, but in my opinion, it's the best in the series. The installments after this one still evolve and play with new ideas, but despite every RTJ project having its own unique atmosphere, Run the Jewels 2 is definitely my favorite. Of course, an amount is owed to nostalgia, but even when I try and look at it objectively, I feel like 2 still gets to the top spot, with 3 being just a hair beneath it. It's insanely impressive what LP pulls off on the production side of things because there's a diversity in aesthetics and song types, yet everyone is still a banger. Some may have really fat 808s that accompany a faster paced beat, like the previously mentioned Oh My Darling Don't Cry, but then you go to a song like the opening track here, and the tempo is much slower to complement the smoky, epic horns, but the ultimate product still has rich, full drums that hit harder than a lot of trap beats whose entire purpose is to knock. There isn't really a moment I'd describe on this entire album as tame, it's just the lighter samples and their treatment that make certain songs seem slightly less intense by comparison. But that's not a negative at all. Again, it's a feat that not many can pull off, because it would be easy to just throw in some quiet or minimal drums on a track to drastically shift the tone and energy. Instead, Run the Jewels virtually never run into that territory, even when they discuss serious and powerful personal issues. The beat that'll accompany them is usually epic, cinematic, and emotional all at the same time. They don't really touch many depressing personal qualms until the third album, though, with the second being more of an update of the debut's merciless, borderline terroristic attitude. There's so many verbal middle fingers to just about all of society on here, from LP's line about how his critics should run naked backwards through a field of dicks, to Mike's about running the jewels or losing your fingers. El Producto even has a set of lines at the end of the first track that in my mind perfectly lay out what their MO with Run the Jewels 2 was. He says, "Motherfuck your permission was never yours to begin with, and every bar of that bitch shit you spit is your fucking prison. I've been here making raw shit and never asked to be lauded. Run the Jewels to answer your question is what's poppin'." If you need yet another accolade that this album accrued, it's actually had a remix album called Meow the Jewels, which is without a doubt the type of thing that could only really happen in the internet age. If I remember correctly, this actually stemmed from a joke tweet LP posted when he was drunk or something, where if a certain number of fans followed whatever the prompt was, they would create a remix album of Run the Jewels 2 strictly using cat sounds. Regardless of whether the initial idea was actually serious or not, L stood on his word and decided to bring a group of super producers together to assist him in this bizarre undertaking. Just some of those legends he recruited were Prince Paul, The Alchemist, Blood Diamonds, Dan the Automator, Just Blaze, and Zola Jesus, amongst others. On the original Run the Jewels 2, all the beats are done solely by LP himself, as I believe is the case for all four Run the Jewels albums. They do have some great guest appearances, though, including Gangsta Boo, Diane Coffey, Boots, Travis Barker, and Zach De La Roca of Rage Against the Machine, who I believe actually lived with LP for a while, and in a way is sort of the honorary third member of Run the Jewels. While I mentioned before that the intro track, Jeopardy, is an amazing way to start this LP off, the three tracks that follow it form such a ridiculous run that the opening track has to be an honorable mention, along with All My Life, Lie, Cheat, Steal, Early, Crown, and Angel Duster. That leaves my three absolute favorite tracks as Oh My Darling Don't Cry, Blockbuster Night Part 1, and Close Your Eyes and Count to Fuck. Thank you for watching my 69th video. We only have one more album left in this group, and then we're going to be looping around back to the 80s. I'm only going to do 5 for that group again, since there's way less output from that decade, and that way I can make it last a little longer. So tune in next time to see what my last pick for this set is. And if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite songs off this top album of 2014 are. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Alright.